Good morning to everyone, and welcome to this CEFN webinar on funding in Wales. Today's webinar is kindly hosted by Dave Bevan of Concept Business Solutions. Our event today will be 45 minutes of presentation by Dave, followed by a Q&A session on any specific questions that you might have. For those who want to ask a question, there is an option in the Zoom menu for Q&A, which you can use to ask us a question at any time during the presentation. So without much further ado, I will hand over to Dave, who will take it.
Thank you, Derry. Good morning to everyone on this lovely day. Thanks very much for your time this morning. The Funding in Wales presentation I'm going to give today will give an overview of funding. We will talk about the content of the presentation, the aim of the presentation. I'll talk some about COVID-19 funding support, which is relevant in the current circumstances we face at the moment. I'll go into Welsh Government funding. I'll also go into local authority funding and also into Development Bank of Wales funding and some other funding that, that you may not know about. And also after the presentation, I'll provide you with some useful links to use if you feel that you need further information on certain funds. And finally at the end, I'll be open to questions. If you have any certain questions you want to ask me, that's absolutely fine. So if we move into the main aim of this presentation is to provide an overview of potential funding in Wales for SMEs. I've worked with a lot of companies over the span of over 20 years with funding, and I'm going to give you an overview of that funding today. So, as we know, in response to the current pandemic and the effect on businesses, the government set out the following support as a reaction to supporting companies that were either forced to close down or due to lay staff off, etc. So the Economic Resilience Fund. I want to particularly talk about this because it's relevant. If you go onto the site, the Welsh Government site, it's currently paused at the moment. Now, the reason it's paused is because the Welsh Government have been inundated with applications, as you can imagine. They offer grants to micro businesses, small SMEs and large companies as well. The current pause is due to the fact of the amount of applications, but Welsh Government are assessing this at this moment in time and will will come back shortly with hopefully some further funds to support companies in Wales. The companies that were eligible for that Economic Resilience Fund were particularly companies that didn't fit the criteria of the next heading I'll go under now, which would be the rates relief for Wales, which covered retail, leisure, hospitality, 100% rate relief, and grants up to 10,000 to 25 based on rateable value. So companies that didn't fit into that particular grant were able to apply for the Economic Resilience Fund. Now, moving on to which I think is a good scheme, the coronavirus bounce back loan. I'm not sure whether any of you have applied for it, but it's a good scheme. It's you can borrow up to 20% of the company turnover to a maximum of 50,000. And through experience working with companies, the application process is straightforward, easy. If you go to your own lender, and usually the funds are in your account within 24 hours, and I've had a lot of companies feedback to me on this, and they have had funds in their account within 24 hours. It's 100% government guarantee, so there's no personal guarantees needed. No payments and interest free for the first year, so you don't actually pay any payments or interest for the first year. The loan will be over 6 years, and the rate of interest after the year will be 2.5%. So I would urge companies to look into this if you haven't already. It's a good scheme. It's a good way of financing the company through these very uncertain times. Okay, so continuing on the COVID-19 funding support, you will probably be aware of this. I think it's relevant to talk about these schemes if you do employ people. The Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme funds up to 80% of monthly wage costs, up to a maximum of $2,500 per month. Now, this scheme was due to end in August, but the government have extended it to October 2020. It's a good scheme to have, and it sort of safeguards employees that otherwise would have been made redundant or taken unpaid leave. So the next one, self-employment income support scheme. This is a taxable grant of 80% of average monthly trading profits. It's a single investment covering 3 months. And just to bear in mind as well that there's no application deadline for this at this moment in time. So don't worry if you haven't made or allocated a date and time with the HMRC. The invitation doesn't expire, and as I said, there's no time limit to it either. Okay, so that's important to know. So we go into Welsh Government funding at this present moment in time, and I was talking earlier about this as well. It's nice sometimes to come back and report to you, because the funding in Wales does change, and these times that we're going through at the moment are uncertain, and the funding scene does change on a regular basis. New things come through, so and that's government reacting really to the current demand for business finance and support in Wales. So the first one I'm going to talk about is this part of Welsh Government is companies that are looking at improving their processes, and also if they're developing new products, services for the market, then this could be of support to small, medium-sized companies. So the Innovation Funding IV, it's a development and introduction of innovative product or process, and that is up to 50%, max 25,000. This scheme is it's got a relatively straightforward scheme to apply for. There's an application form that you complete to talk about what you're planning to do, what impact that has on your business, how you're changing your process if you're manufacturing or whatever, introducing new technology. Then this could be a one-off support to support the cost incurred in that as well. So it's 50% to a max of 25. As I mentioned earlier, at the end of this presentation, I've attached some useful links. So if you need to click onto it and have a look through, the link will take you to the particular section for Smart Cymru funding support. And there are other support options there as well if you're working with a university to collaborate in developing new products, processes. There's some funding support for that as well, but in particular, I pull these ones out because I think they're quite relevant. The next one is Process Innovation, IV+. This is to implement a new method of production, process or service. It seems quite similar to the IV above, but the rate of grant intervention is higher. So it's up to 50%, max 100,000. And again, it's a similar application form. It's about 2 sheets that you need to complete to talk about your project in more detail. And and also it can fund an upgrade to a recently developed product and industrial deployment. So it kind of, if you're introducing new technology, new machinery to your process equipment, and it's new technology to the business, then these may support you in some grant funding. So it's 50% intervention. So Welsh Government need to be satisfied that the balance of the investment, the other 50%, it will be in place. And drawdown on these particular funds, the two I'm talking about now, is you have to pay the equipment and then you draw the money down. So that's important to bear in mind if you are looking at this. So the next one is Smart Cymru R&D. Now this is a larger fund for larger R&D projects, but you know I've worked with a lot of companies, small companies that have projects that they're going to be working on. They may run a business alongside, but they've got a development arm to it as well. They're looking into developing a new product to sell to the market or whatever. So there's quite a bit of funding under this scheme. And just to give you a kind of insight, which again, go back to the links that I have provided at the end of the slide. These are kind of numbers of, you know, it can be anything from feasibility study to 30,000. It could be industrial research and development up to 100. So there's significant amounts of money in that particular fund. So basically, it is linked to R&D, but this scheme has been running for a very long time. It's been hugely successful for even startups as well that are looking at new products, processes, or new products for the market. So it's one to bear in mind. Then we go on to repayable business finance. This scheme has been in Welsh Government for a very long time. It was, I think it was around over 8 years ago that government decided to, instead of offering a grant, they would offer repayable business finance under, you know, good terms, and the rate of intervention, the rate the company potentially could get, is around sort of 30 to 40% of the project. Now, this repayable business finance, as it says, it is repayable, but there's favourable terms to businesses. For example, you know, you could have a payment holiday for a year or whatever. It tends to kick in the payments when the company's in profits. In repayable business finance, there's no limit to it in terms of rates that you get. So it's between 50 and up in the millions, really. And obviously, the larger the project, the more funding you're likely to get through that scheme. It's not a loan. It's because it would come under obviously the levels of sort of it's 0% interest rate, and it's repayable, and that's agreed when any offer's gone out to a business. It is linked to, similar to grants, think of it the way of a grant, it is linked to similar criteria to the grant. So it is linked to job creation, and there needs to be a level of capital spend in the spend as well. Okay, so every project is assessed on a, you know, case-by-case basis, really. So that's been going for a long time. It's still out there at the moment, but with the current situation with funds changing dramatically to support the situation that we're in at the moment, and businesses are under pressure, it's still there, but there's not really been an uptake on that particularly because of the other funds coming in. So that's around, that will certainly be around for the future. And it's I've worked with companies that have had this funding and it works for them, and they're quite happy to repay it back because it kind of recycles the money, so other businesses can gain support through this as well. One of the things that you want to bear in mind as well on this particular fund is that they will, you have to exhaust all the areas of funding before you go to Welsh Government for this particular Payable Business Finance. So what that really means is that, you've gone to your own bank, you may have had a loan, but you've maybe been to Development Bank of Wales, and there is still a gap in the funding of your project to move it forward. So therefore, this is where the intervention comes in from Welsh Government and say, well, there's a gap in the funding, and the company would require 30, 50, 60, 70,000 pounds to enable the project to proceed, and it would create X amount of jobs and provide many benefits to Wales as well. So yeah, good scheme, and a lot of companies have taken that up a lot over the years. So I want to talk on this slide about, which I think is relevant really, local authority funding, because some organisations, businesses as well, micro businesses, small businesses, tend to forget that through their busy lives as well, that they've got things to do. That actually councils do provide smaller grants as well for smaller projects. When we say projects, it could be, I'm going to run through an example as well through a local authority in particular, just to give you some flavour of what type of support they do offer. They get allocated a budget for every year for business development, business grants. And of course, these times that we're going through at the moment, I would think that councils have been allocated monies and will be working on some maybe schemes in the near future, but we'll wait and see, and that's maybe an opportunity to come back and to sort of update you on any new funds that come through. So in particular, get onto the website of your local authority, wherever you are, whether it be Cardiff, Leith, Port Talbot, Newport, and just have a look at what the council, plugging business grants into the search engine, and it will come up with some funding that will be available as well. I know that Newport City Council offer small grants for startups, and they're normally from £500 to £1,000 for smaller projects, but they do offer as well a loan scheme. So, small companies can apply for that as well, and they're very, very favourable terms. So again, emphasise the fact that, look at your local authority site as well, because they may have funds, or they may be developing some new funds to support companies within the local authority area. In particular, I want to talk about a local authority area, Piccadilly Council. So, in terms of their grants, they offer grants from 1,000 to 2,500, and some of these funds will support things like marketing, things like the website, which maybe you wouldn't have thought of in the past of support towards that. But it's like I said, it's always worthwhile looking at it. It supports things like capital spend. If you wanted to buy a small machine, it could be a laptop, it could be a printer that you wanted. Those are the type of things that they would support, and the application process is quite straightforward. It's not intense. You provide some information on your company, turnover. If you have accounts, then you can provide those accounts to them, and they're turned around quite quickly as well. So yeah, have a look at that, because they are relevant and they do support smaller projects. And I know a lot of companies that I've worked with have benefited from local authority funding. So it's always good to keep an eye on what goes on there. And of course now, especially in these times as well, that they, as I said, they will be looking at other things as well. So just to recap on the local authority, which I think is very important. Websites, e-commerce sites, feasibility studies, even business planning. If you're looking at putting a business plan together and you need assistance with that, then some of this funding can actually go towards that. And maybe the business plan that you're preparing is you're actually going for more additional funding, maybe through Development Bank or Welsh Government or whatever, but it will support things like that. Capital equipment, even hardware, software, and some, in many cases, property infrastructure as well. If you have commercial premises, there may be some support through there. I know that Rhondda and Taft do something very similar on properties as well, and they had a scheme that would support some changes to a retail shop as well. So again, very important to sort of keep on with that. And as I said, I've provided those links in the slide as well. So we move on to Development Bank of Wales funding. Just to give you probably know this, I don't know, but I'll let you know anyway. So Development Bank of Wales was set up by Welsh Government to support the economy in Wales and businesses, small, micro, small, medium sized and large. They offer microloans. I'm just going to go back slightly on this. When all this happened with the coronavirus pandemic, Development Bank of Wales did bring out a fund in response to that. But as you can imagine, the uptake on that, and that was at the early stages of it, was unbelievable. And I think within a week, they had to close the fund down because it was kind of oversubscribed. But this is the funding that's out there. It's still available, and it will be available in the future as well. So the microloans are loans from 1,000 to 50,000, and also if you're looking to apply for a smaller loan, 1,000 to 10,000 as well, we've got a 2-day fast track scheme that the information that you provide Development Bank of Wales is not intense. It's kind of information that you would assume that they would need, but they can generally turn those around pretty quickly for the right type of businesses as well. So something to consider. Development Bank of Wales as well. They do work on a lot of other schemes as well, but I thought this one was kind of more relevant to the audience. But if not, happy to provide some further information on the other types of funds that they offer as well. They look at sort of things like equity as well, so they provide equity funding and a match of others as well, technology funding as well for businesses that are high kind of tech as well. So the equity funding, they obviously have a stake in the business, and they've done a lot of work with investments on startups as well, new ideas. So I provided that link in this presentation for that. So the general repayment terms, they range from 1 to 10 years. So if you're a business and you keep an eye on cash flow, then obviously you can spread that term over a longer period. The interest rates are charged are based on the individual circumstances, so and a fixed for the term of the loan, so nothing changes with that. And I know a lot of businesses have taken advantage of this micro loan because it's especially the fast track scheme as well, because it's so flexible. And not to forget what I mentioned earlier in my presentation about the bounce back loan as well. A lot of companies have taken advantage of that because where would you find funding of that level and rate as well, and favorable terms on a year non-repayment and interest payments as well. So, so something to consider in terms of if you're looking at some debt finance for your business to help you through these very, uncertain times, to get you back on track. There's some options there you can you can look at. Okay, so this is a relatively well, it's not a new fund, but it's come out basically over the period of time with in respects of the COVID-19 support that's currently out there. So it's a 5 million enterprise relief fund, and what you find with schemes like this is that UK government tend to look at areas of support and try to look at areas within in the economy that are kind of underrepresented in a way where they can't always apply for grants, maybe through Welsh Government or other schemes as well. So I think this scheme is good, and it's if you're 18 to 30, it's a 5 million fund, and across the UK for people who are self-employed, running their own business. In conjunction with Cash Grant Initiative, we offer one-to-one support and guidance to anyone who needs it, and may be worried about the future of their business as well. Grants can be used to maintain core business operations during the crisis, as well as meeting any existing financial commitments, paying for essential equipment or invoices from suppliers. Additional grants will also support young people to diversify their business and respond to opportunities created by the crisis. So, I don't know, an example of that would be, we've seen a lot of businesses at the moment looking to diversify currently into, producing masks or face guards, or printing companies have changed the way they operate. They're moving into a lot of signage and things like that. So it kind of that's I think that's what they're looking into, diversifying. So cash flow is protected, and sales are protected as well. So to be eligible to apply, you must be a business owner aged 18 to 30, set up their business in the last 4 years and don't have any other source of income during the crisis. So I think it goes back to what I said about government looking at areas within funding support that that are not being covered. So I think it's a good scheme, and again, I've provided a link on the presentation for you to look at more detailed information on it as well. I think recently they have had a surge. You can imagine a surge of people looking into this fund as well. So they have said that calls will take a bit longer, and the response is slightly longer as well, as you would appreciate. So I think something to look at, and well worth if you're aged between 18 and 30. So looking into there are other funds out there, and these tend to be loans, which I've not included in this, but there's organisations set up on a not-for-profit basis that offer loans to companies that otherwise wouldn't get normal access to funds through banks and others. And just I mean, Purple Shoots is one that the charity set up to support small businesses, micro businesses to start up, to provide loans. They're very good on the loans. They're not expensive. They're there to support somebody setting up a sole trader or partnership or whatever, have an idea. And it's the support there as well for business planning. I know the organisation has a number of voluntary mentors as well that can help business tap into some of the financial support as well. And there's some others around as well that offer something similar by way of loan as well. But just going back to what I mentioned earlier about the funding landscape, it does change. And, you know, I would anticipate that, you know, maybe new schemes will come in because we are going through this process of, you know, when the business is open. So, and that in itself will be a huge cost to individuals, whether they're in retail or manufacturing or whatever. There is a cost to pay for that to implement the social distancing requirements from the government as well. So that could be, you know, it's a new way of operating for all businesses. So as I said, there'll be an element of cost to that, certainly. And if you don't fit those guidelines, of course, then there'll be an issue of you starting back up. So yeah, as I said, the landscape does change, and I think it would be great to sort of come back and update you really on some of the funds that that are coming, maybe coming out or in development stage as well. But what I try to do on these slides really is to give you an overview of basically what's in Wales currently. Going back to the COVID-19 slide I talked about earlier, there are businesses that yes, you would imagine that the press put out funds there, you know, what they're about, and companies have taken full advantage of them. And I know the rate relief one was a highly sort of sought after fund where different local authorities had different processes. I know that maybe they have an application form you have to fill in. Some had an online portal where you put all your information on, and actually, you know, I think it was taking about 10 to 12 days of payment in some local authority areas. So there's the links to some of the funds that I've been talking about as well. I think most importantly as well, these sites are very good on, you know, useful information on something maybe you can sort of tap into and see whether your business does fit into those schemes. The sort of Business Wales website is a very good tool to use if you are looking at funds and you're a small business. You know, click onto the Business Wales website and you'll have tabs there to guide you through whether it's a grant that you're looking at, or whether you're self-employed and you need support for your business or for your design. There's an array of information there, and it's good quality information as well. It's not hard to navigate through. Thanks for. I know it's a 45-minute presentation, but what I try to do, hopefully, is cover some of the areas that maybe some people might not be aware of funding out there, and any funds that you do apply for, there is an application process, and they all differ in the content that is required, the information that's required. But there is help out there to help individuals to apply for funding and you know, answer those questions that maybe you may not be able to answer, and some of the things that, you know, particular funds and the criteria set out, that some of the things they look at and they want to see that you may not be aware of that. So yeah, well, thanks very much. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you to everyone for attending today. There are no questions at the moment, unfortunately.
Okay, but I think that probably bear in mind that, as I said earlier, that the funding scene does change on a regular basis. So I think it's very important that to keep in touch, I suppose, with things like this to be aware of what's available, or you will miss out. I mean, I can only go back to my whole experience of funding and the amount of businesses that said to me that I wish I met you a year ago, or we didn't know about this. And I think it's important to keep on top. We're all running business at the end of the day, and it is very difficult to keep on top. This is my job, so I do on a regular basis. But I think for me, it's more about informing people, and especially when the events had happened and businesses were forced to close through government guidelines. I remember working the whole bank holiday and sending emails out to all clients to make them aware of the funding that was available out there for them, and information as well about the application process. And you will find that the COVID-19 support, it was a pretty streamlined process, because government wanted to get that money out there ASAP to support businesses. And who knows, I would like to think that moving forward, it's going to be a different type of moving forward, but government will consider some further support, and I'll be quite happy to share that information with or everybody that participated and is on the scheme as well. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, certainly. And for those people who are existing members of Kevin, you can speak to your Kevin manager or myself, and we'll be able to put you in touch with Dave. If you aren't a member of Kevin, then if you do sign up with us, then you'll be able to get access to Dave and his support and his knowledge, as well as the same for many other people as well. So, again, a big thank you to Dave for delivering the extremely useful webinar. All of you who are watching, before you go, we'd be very grateful if you could put in the survey that's connected to the exit screen on Zoom.
Sorry, I missed that. Sorry.
We have a survey when when the attendees exit Zoom.
Oh, right, yeah.
You essentially give us feedback to make sure that we are doing what we need to do. So, and just to get for you, all of you, to give feedback to us as well. So again, many thanks, Dave.
Okay, thank you very much.